She stood in my workshop holding an old suitcase, rain dripping from her coat, like she'd been driving away from something she couldn't outrun. I hadn't seen Naomi Brooks in 4 years. The last time we spoke, she told me she wasn't ready to build a life with anyone. Now she looked me straight in the eyes and whispered, "I need you to pretend you're my husband. Just for one weekend." I should have laughed. Instead, I asked one question that changed both our lives. "Who are we lying to?" Rain has a strange way of making familiar places feel like somewhere you've never been before. The afternoon sky over Willow Creek had turned the color of old steel, and the steady rhythm of rain against the roof of my furniture workshop was the only sound left in town. I was sanding the edge of an oak dining table when the front bell rang once, then again, slow, hesitant, the kind of knock someone makes when they're already thinking about turning around. I wiped the sawdust from my hands and opened the door. A woman stood there with one worn leather suitcase in one hand and rainwater dripping from the sleeves of an oversized green coat. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled, though it looked more like something she had borrowed than something she actually felt. "Hi, Jared." I hadn't heard that voice in 4 years. Naomi Brooks, the woman who once told me she wasn't ready for forever. She looked older now, not because of wrinkles, but because life had clearly been asking more of her than it should have. Her dark hair was pinned back in a hurry, loose strands clinging to her face from the rain, and her eyes carried the kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside without thinking. She walked in, looked around the workshop and smiled at the smell of fresh-cut wood. "Still smells the same." "Wood usually does," I answered. That earned the smallest laugh I'd heard all week. It disappeared almost immediately. She rested the suitcase beside the workbench and wrapped both hands around a cup of coffee I poured for her. She didn't drink it. She just held it, letting the warmth reach her fingers. "You look surprised," she said. "I am. Fair enough." Silence settled between us again. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the hills. Finally, she looked at me with a seriousness that made every ordinary thought disappear. "I need a favor." I folded my arms. "That depends on the favor," she inhaled slowly. "I need you to pretend you're my husband. For one weekend." If anyone else had said those words, I would have laughed. With Naomi, I couldn't. There was something in her eyes that made jokes feel disrespectful. "Who are we pretending for?" I asked. Her fingers tightened around the mug. "My grandmother." She looked down before continuing. "She raised me after my parents died. Last month, the doctors told us her heart is failing." She asked if she could see me one more time. Naomi stopped, swallowing hard. "And she asked to meet the husband I've been telling her about." I blinked. "You've been telling your grandmother you're married?" "Not married." She gave an embarrassed smile. "Engaged? To me?" No," she sighed. "To someone who doesn't exist." I leaned back against the workbench, crossing my arms. "That's ambitious." She laughed once through her nose. "I know." For the first time since she'd arrived, I saw a glimpse of the woman I remembered. Smart, funny, always trying to carry too much by herself. "Why me?" I finally asked. She looked around the workshop before answering. "Because you're the only man I've ever trusted enough to ask." Those words landed harder than I expected. 4 years earlier, we'd spent nearly every evening together restoring an old library that the town wanted to demolish. Somewhere between repairing shelves and repainting windows, I'd fallen in love with her. I never blamed her for leaving. She had accepted a job across the country. We both chose our futures. Life simply chose different roads for us. "It's only Saturday and Sunday," she continued softly. "Dinner with the family, church Sunday morning, my grandmother's birthday lunch. Then I'll disappear back into my own life, and yours goes back to normal." I looked out the rain-streaked window. "You really think pretending is that easy?" "No, then why do it?" Naomi stared into the untouched coffee. "Because she deserves to believe I found someone who makes me feel safe." The workshop became very quiet. I knew she wasn't asking me to help with a lie. She was asking me to protect someone she loved during what might be the last weekend they ever shared. That made saying no a lot harder. "Does anyone else know?" I asked. "Only my cousin Olivia. She's the one who convinced me to ask you. She always did enjoy impossible ideas." Naomi smiled. "She said if anybody could survive a weekend with my family, it'd be you. That's not exactly comforting." This time she laughed properly. It echoed through the workshop and somehow made the room feel warmer. "There are rules," she said quickly. "Good. We definitely need rules." She held up one finger. "No real feelings." "Pretty sure those aren't something you schedule." She ignored the comment. "Second, we sleep in separate beds if possible." "If possible." It's an old family farmhouse. I'm making promises the house might not cooperate with. Wonderful. Third, she hesitated. If at any point you want to leave, you leave. No questions. I looked at her for several long seconds before nodding once. "All right," she frowned. "That's it?" "That's it. You're not going to ask what's in it for you?" I shrugged. "Sometimes helping someone is enough." She looked away quickly, blinking more than the rain seemed to justify. "You haven't changed much, have you?" I smiled. "You'd be surprised." We packed before sunrise the next morning. The rain had stopped, leaving the roads washed clean beneath a pale blue sky. Naomi sat quietly in the passenger seat as my old pickup rolled toward Maple Ridge, the small farming town where she'd grown up. Most of the drive passed in comfortable silence until she suddenly reached into her bag and handed me a small photograph. It showed the two of us from years earlier, standing in front of the restored library, both covered in paint and laughing at something the camera could never remember. "Grandma has this picture," Naomi said. "She thinks that's when we got engaged." I looked at the photograph, then back at the road. "Looks like we've been lying longer than I realized." Naomi stared out the window, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe. I just never had the courage to tell her about the only man I almost said yes to. James kept reading. "Ms. Johnson, in 1957, a woman like you raised a son like me. My mother. She was a single black woman who cleaned houses. She found a wallet on a bus when I was 4 years old. She returned it. Her honesty changed my life. It changed my mother's life. It is the only reason I have anything that I have today." James took a breath. "I did not believe my mother's stories for many years. I thought the world had changed. I thought nobody was raising children like that anymore. I thought women like my mother were the last of their kind. Then your granddaughter handed me my wallet on a Thursday morning, and I believed my mother again. Miss Johnson, you did not just raise a good woman. You kept a whole way of being alive in this world. You kept my mother's faith alive. And I am writing this letter to thank you." Pearl was crying now. Real crying. The kind that comes up from deep down. The kind that has been waiting 40 years to come out. James kept reading. "In honor of what you have done, I have arranged the following. Ms. Pearl Johnson will be moved to Riverside Gardens, the finest assisted living facility in this city, effective immediately. All costs covered for the rest of her natural life. There will be a private room, a garden view, round-the-clock nursing. A college fund of $40,000 has been set up for each of Maya's children. Zuri and Malik. Maya has been offered, and we hope she will accept, a permanent position with Hendricks Logistics, with a starting salary of $58,000 a year and full benefits." Pearl was holding the roses against her chest. Her whole body was shaking with the crying. "Ms. Johnson, my mother passed away in 1998. I never got to thank her enough. I never got to tell her how much she did for me. So I am telling you, thank you. Thank you for the woman you raised. Thank you for the world you helped make." The right thing came back. It came back to your granddaughter. It came back to my family. It came back to all of us. "Yours sincerely, Walter Hendricks." James folded the letter. He placed it gently on Pearl's lap on top of the roses. The room was completely silent except for Pearl crying. Pearl was not crying small tears. She was crying. The big shaking sobs of an old woman who had spent her whole life believing in something that the world kept trying to tell her was foolish. She was crying for her own mother, who had also cleaned houses for white families. She was crying for Maya's mother, who had died in a waiting room while people walked past. She was crying for every quiet right thing she had ever done that nobody had thanked her for. She was crying because for the first time in maybe 40 years, the world had stood up and said, "We see you. We see what you did. We see what you built. We see what it cost you. And we are saying thank you." Maya knelt down next to her grandmother's wheelchair. She put her head on Pearl's shoulder. Pearl held her with one hand and held the roses with the other. James the driver took off his cap. He held it against his chest. He had tears running down his face too. He did not say anything. He just stood there in his grey suit in that small living room and let the moment be what it was. After a long time, when Pearl could breathe again, James spoke. "Ms. Johnson, Mr. Hendricks would like to invite you and your family to lunch at his home today. The limousine is yours for the day. Mrs. Hendricks is preparing the meal, if you are willing." Pearl looked at Maya. Pearl's eyes were red. Pearl's face was wet. Pearl was smiling. "Baby, I have not been in a car like that in my whole life. Then we are going, Grandma. We are going." Maya helped Pearl into her best dress. She helped her into her good shoes. She got the kids dressed up. Zuri put on her one church dress. Malik put on a shirt with a collar. James helped Pearl down the 3 flights of stairs, slow and careful, one step at a time. He helped her into the back of the limo. The kids climbed in after her. Their eyes were huge. Malik kept touching the leather seats and giggling. Zuri kept pressing the button to roll the window up and down. The limo pulled away from the curb. Pearl looked out the window as her neighborhood went by. She was holding Walter's letter against her chest like it was a Bible. They had lunch at the Hendricks house. Walter and Eleanor met them at the door. Walter's grandson was there. He was 16 years old. He was on crutches. He had a cast on his leg, but he was alive. He was alive and laughing. Eleanor had made a big meal. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread that she said her mother-in-law had taught her how to make. Walter said grace before they ate. He thanked God for the meal. He thanked God for his grandson. He thanked God for Maya. After lunch, Walter and Pearl sat in the living room together. Walter told Pearl about his mother. Pearl told Walter about her own mother, who had also cleaned houses, who had also taught her to bring back what did not belong to her. They were 2 old people who had grown up in the same world, on different sides of the same tracks, and they had so much to say to each other. Maya watched them from across the room. She watched her grandmother laugh, a real laugh, from her belly, the first one Maya had heard in maybe a year, maybe more. That was when Maya knew. Everything was going to be okay. Not perfect, not easy, but okay. 6 months later, Maya was working at Hendricks Logistics. She wore a name tag. She had her own desk. She had health insurance for the first time in her life. She took the kids to the dentist for the first time in 3 years. Zuri got new shoes. Malik got a winter coat that zipped all the way up. Pearl was at Riverside Gardens. She had a private room with a big window. She had a small garden right outside her window, where she could watch the birds. The nurses knew her name. The nurses brought her tea in the morning. Pearl read her Bible every day. She told the nurses about her granddaughter every chance she got. Maya still rode the bus to work some mornings. The 6:14, she still sat in the back. She still looked at empty seats. She still felt the weight of what one quiet morning had given her. She still heard Pearl's voice in her head. "God's watching, baby, always. Now the story you just heard, it is fiction. Maya Johnson is not a real person. Walter Hendricks is not a real person. The bus, the wallet, the limo, the letter, none of it really happened. But the feelings are real. The single mothers working 2 jobs while raising children and grandparents are real. The eviction notices are real. The grandmothers sleeping in living rooms because nursing homes cost too much are real. The wallets left on buses are real. The choices people make in the back of those buses are real. And the question is real too. The question is always real. What would you have done? If you sat down on a bus tomorrow morning and there was a wallet next to you with $10,000 in it, what would you do? Nobody would know. Nobody would see. You could pay your rent. You could fix your car. You could buy your kids the things they need. You could change your whole life with one quiet decision. But what would you teach your daughter to do? What would you want your son to remember about you when you are gone? That is the only question that ever really matters. Maya Johnson did not get a limo and a job because she was lucky. She did not get those things because the universe owed her one. She got those things because of who her grandmother was. And her grandmother got to be that woman because of who her own mother was. And it goes back. And back and back. A long line of quiet women doing the right thing when nobody was watching. A long line of women who believed God was watching even when the world told them God was not. The right thing always comes back. Sometimes it comes back in a wallet. Sometimes it comes back in a limo. Sometimes it comes back as a letter that makes your grandmother cry harder than she has cried in 40 years. Sometimes it just comes back as a quiet voice in your head, late at night, telling you that you did good today. But it always comes back. So I am going to ask you to do 3 things. Like this video, because it tells me you want to see more stories like this one. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe a single mom you know, maybe a grandmother. Maybe someone who is having a hard week. And subscribe because next week we are telling another story. Another story the world needs to hear, and one more thing. The next time you find something that is not yours, even if it is just $1 on the sidewalk, even if it is just a phone left on a table, even if nobody is watching, do the right thing. Do it because somebody taught you to. Do it because somebody is going to remember you for it one day. Do it because God's watching, baby, always.